Good evening, everyone. Welcome back to the Social Pillar. Good evening, good evening. How is everyone?
Yeah. So excited to be
Good
here.
to see you, Jared. Good to see you,
Good to
Thea.
see you,
Yeah,
Thea.
good
Good
to
to
hear.
see
Can
Yes,
you see
there
Ian.
you are. Excellent.
me?
Welcome. How you doing?
Good.
Good, good. We are ready.
Very exciting.
Yeah,
Welcome,
we
everybody. Guess what we're doing?
we're doing a doing a stream, and tonight's stream is all about world building, secrets, lore, and all the
Dog.
information that a game master needs to run a quality session. So we're gonna talk about how we
Yeah.
approach that, what it means to us, why we like to do it, and why we think it's important, and all the good stuff.
Mm.
That's what
And I
tonight's
have
about.
just seen how I'm looking. My goodness. I'm coming to you I've been digitized. I am
Sounds
now
good to
Tron.
me.
Um, yeah,
And hopefully
amazing.
I'm
I'm going
coming
to come
through
to you from the
okay
digital
because I'm
world.
getting, I'm not in my, you're coming from the digital world? I'm coming from not my usual place. I'm Ian from Roleplay Experience, and or some might know me as Richie Kingsmill from the Departure Lounge. For anyone who knows Triple J, I feel
Sue
like
us.
I need to be saying that. I'm in the Departure Lounge. I'm heading off tonight up to Melbourne, so this is the only time I had a chance we could all chat together, and it's so good to be here. It's a little bit different. Hopefully, technical will stay with us tonight. Over to you, Jared.
Hi, I'm Jared, also known as the Game Master Chef, and yes, I'm totally not doing two things at once. Hi, good evening.
Hi.
We are excited to bring some stuff that I've really been enjoying a lot more recently. Is this world building, fleshing things out, and just customizing things. And I think now that, of course, that we're talking about it, we're seeing opportunities, and I think that's part of why we're here tonight. Is always just pointing out options and things that we can do. But Thea, how are you this evening?
Hmm.
I'm back. I believe I'm
Yeah.
clear again. Hello, I am
Crystal.
Thea. I am OMGM. I am here with Dean Dog, who is slowly trying to pull my seat backwards. So if I start shrinking, yes, it's an exciting digital effect. It is certainly not my dog dragging me across the house. I'm super excited to talk about world building as well. This is something that I think the three of us do a little bit differently. And I'm really looking forward to exploring some of those different perspectives. And yes, Dean Dog will absolutely be making an appearance because right now, this is this is as much of him as you get, but I guarantee there will be more.
Wonderful.
Amazing. So
All
that's
right.
us.
So good to hear.
There was no
I'm
chaos
able
to
to
the start of
introduce.
this stream. It was all totally
Not at all.
smooth. Yeah.
Coherent, planned to the T.
Uh-huh.
But yeah, let's dive into it. Does anybody else have anything else?
Oh, I was
No.
going to say just before we dive in as well, I was loved listening to last week to virtually meet Tushar and listen
Oh,
to a bit
welcome.
about different role playing games. It's going to be good because I think it's about time we started delving into other ones as well. And I think this is fantastic. We get to tonight segue into this about world building. One of the most fun parts of games mastering, dungeon mastering, being able to bring lore to your game. I can't wait. And I know that we have different ways. I'd be very keen to see in the chat what everyone has to say as well about potential experiences and your ways of world building. So please bring them in there. But anyway, I'm keen as I'm looking forward to hearing it. So I'll hand over to you guys. Who wants to kick off?
Did we have a plan? We had a plan, didn't
We always
we?
have a plan, and the plan is we'll start with a question. And the question for this
Yeah,
evening is
I think that's a good one.
why this particular topic. We're gonna kind of have this format, I think, moving forward, or something reminiscent of it. But I
Yeah,
think we want to
yeah,
answer a question
that's
right
okay.
off the bat. And why is world building important, and why does world building help you run your sessions, and how does it make playing
Mm.
more enjoyable? Like, I think we can
Mm,
talk on both sides of the coin, because there's always this mysterious thing about game mastery, which is how much of it is improvised, how much is
mm,
planned, and how much is prepped. So, like, how much are you actually writing? How much are you actually planning and
mm,
organizing and plotting versus the improvised, on the fly, random item that turns into a magical thing, and this is so valuable and so useful somehow, etc., etc. Um, we've all
Yeah,
seen different things like that, I think, as DMs, because also you will plan something, write it down, and like you said, Ian, you put it in the drawer. You just put it aside for
mm.
another time. So yeah,
Yeah, I think
Yeah, we talked about
we've
that.
all got different approaches.
Yeah.
Yeah, we did. We talked about this, and back sort of one of our early streams, we talked about some of these different approaches. But I think tonight we really want to get into that world building and more around the kind of tech side of it. Like, what do we do? How do we do it? Why do we do it? And how does it help? Does it help? Does it hinder?
Yeah.
Mm.
Is world building the BBEG all along?
Yeah. How much planning goes into that? Yeah.
Mhm.
Actually, is a plan.
And I can
Very much.
guarantee we all have very different approaches to that.
Yes, absolutely.
So I guess the question is, where do we start? Like any good story, do we start at the beginning? Do we flashback?
Well, I was gonna suggest maybe, I mean, I can give a bit of a definition from a point of view, and actually, if you want to build off that, that might be good, just about what world building can be. Because I'm interested to talk about this with GMs, with two of you particularly, and how you approach it, and anyone else who wants to add in the chat. But story points, like if you're a games master, you're leading the world for everybody. So that includes the people, the places, and the history, the locations, yeah, all the items, the magic that appears, the way if there are gods like in high fantasy games like Dungeons and Dragons, how do they interact? How do people follow them? How do factions fight each other? All that kind of stuff. Or how do they get along? Just literally, how do different groups of people get along? What are these story points, therefore, that are important to you? How much do you develop them? How much do you set up? How much do you do on the fly? And when do you reveal them? Is probably an interesting point that I think is going to be very interesting to talk about too, because it comes to, there are some juicy bits of information that you just want to reveal, but if you reveal it too early, it's going to lose the dramatic impact.
Yeah.
It's not going to have any kind of weight to it. So that's kind of like where I think this is leading, let alone just the idea of what is world building, what is lore, and trying to put that together for people, and how do we do it? When do we reveal it? Why do we reveal it? I'm very keen to look at that.
Yeah.
So well
And I
put.
think that,
How's that for a kickoff?
yeah.
What do you guys?
So well put.
Absolutely perfect.
Yeah, because I think world building is it really at the core of it is just another tool that helps you run your games.
Yes.
And the different approaches that you take, like any of the tools that we talk about that we use that other people use out there, it needs to be a tool that works for you, you know, and the approach that works for you. And there is no right or wrong. I mean, you can look at some people that have just volumes and volumes about their worlds. And then you can look at people that have, you know, a pile of notes that they can barely read. And that works. Both of those are worlds, is enough world building for that person. And I can almost guarantee that we all have quite different approaches. I'm quite minimalist, but I currently have a dog tearing a couch apart. So maybe could I suggest somebody else jumps in while I
Throw
go
it
deal
over.
with that?
Throw it over. 100%.
Go for it. What
Go
you need
for
to
it.
do.
Do what you need.
Well, I had
to
an idea.
Yes.
Jared, I had an idea here, actually. I might throw in for
Yes.
just to give people context, particularly those of you out there who may not be DMs and may be interested in this and what we go about, but to give context that might be familiar. So to give a kind of a one particular world, to give an idea of what we're talking about by lore. So I just wanted to bring up the idea of the One Ring and
Okay.
Middle Earth.
Okay.
And
yes.
the first story
Mm.
is The Hobbit, which many people may have gotten into when they were younger. And if you set a game in that kind of world, you've got this guy named Bilbo, who's a hobbit who gets thrown into an adventure and has this strange old man who's a wizard who gets him to work with these really like knockabout dwarves, and they go on to this massive adventure which he doesn't know what he's doing. And halfway through, he gets this ring out of nowhere, and it's kind of thrown in, and it feels like almost thrown in at last minute. But he is, yes, awesome, like an original image. This idea, like he meets elves and he has, you know, gets away from trolls and all this kind of stuff, and then he meets Gollum, this creature in the middle of underneath the earth, and he has a ring, and he puts it on, and he disappears, and he goes invisible, and it's just a nice little trick. And for the rest of the adventure, he just uses it. The rest of the story, kind of like an adventure, very much what D&D, a lot of D&D was based on, was him being able to use this to outwit a dragon, to also outwit his own friends when they started getting greedy, like Thorin, the dwarf king. And eventually it just becomes kind of almost like this little fun trick because he actually did a lot of the work by how he used his resources, etc.
Yeah.
And that kind of basic lore is one way of looking at it. But if you're going into a bigger world, as the Lord of the Rings became in the books after with Frodo, his nephew, you find out the ring itself has all this other information, and it's way more important than he could ever have imagined, and is incredibly evil, and links to the films that we know about and the stories that we know about as well. Putting all that together, we know Tolkien wrote so much, and he even wrote languages, and
God, yeah.
he wrote massive backstories that go back thousands of years, like mythology for this world. That's pretty fantastic, but I don't think everyone
Yeah.
needs to do that for a game.
No,
But that's some
so
context to
perfectly
give
well
an
done.
idea
Yeah.
for people out there, just to get an idea of how
Yeah.
much lore is
Well,
useful for your game.
I mean, what I'm holding up for those who are listening is a book written by David Day, and it's a guide to Tolkien, and it's essentially a glossary. But so much more than that, it is what you would say is the facts. You know, like if you distilled a campaign in an epic world that you were creating into names and places, and all of those names and places did things, you'd have a book similar to this. So yeah, without the story, this is distilled as the facts of the world, effectively. So yeah, we're
Amazing.
talking an epic tale from from so many eras when you really get into it. But you know, just exactly that is the one story. And again, my players kind of lurking in the chat in hopes of picking up some nuggets. I will say we have actually talked about the invisible powder. And I love that I could now just overlay all of Lord of the Rings on that. Thank you very much.
We've heard about this invisible powder. Do you want to tell that story?
Well,
I think that's a really good one.
Yeah, I mean that's exactly
how
it.
lore comes out.
It's almost exactly. Now that you've said it, I feel unoriginal. But basically, you know, I give out random loot from tables and stuff, and sometimes it'll have a decent description, and sometimes I just like the idea of the item. So it might be like an eyeglass that lets them do this, and I'm like, that doesn't help the rogue. The rogue doesn't need to see things, but maybe they would like to see magical traps, so they get, you know, like an eyeglass or whatever, right? So I'll adapt and do that with stuff. So the barbarian. Here we go. Hang on. The invisible powder. What is it? What does it do?
Here we go.
How do I know how do I know how much I have? It's invisible. Exactly. So in a
very
random,
literal invisible powder.
I couldn't even tell you how exactly I gave this to said player, but the barbarian now has a little silver jewelry box, not much bigger than say a packet of cigarettes or something. And inside, you can feel when you shake it, when it's closed and you shake it, you can feel like sand moving inside. And when you open it, there's nothing there, or it appears that there's nothing there. But when you pinch into it, there is a powder that, when sprinkled upon an object, temporarily allows it to be invisible. And that wasn't the original purpose of the box. It was just a jewelry box, or I gave a jewelry box and some other stuff. And I thought, okay, we'll flesh this out later. And then now we can go into present moment, which is how does it work? How much do they have? As the players have said, they don't know how much they have. They don't know how much they need. So it's a puzzle and a risk and a reward all in of its own. But where did this powder come from? Is the powder ever going to be proven useful, or is it just going to be a utility thing that's used occasionally? Or is it going to be the thing that takes down the big bad? Both of those things in Lord of the Rings. It's the cool trinket thing in The Hobbit, and it's the thing that takes down the big bad in Lord of the Rings. So which campaign are we going to run? That's the fun of it, because we make it all up as we go. No, but yeah, that's the story of the box of invisible powder. Because, and I also do that with like a shield of brewing. There was one that was like, oh, if you place it down on a table, it'll create some mugs of ale or something. And I thought, no, it brews tea. So now they have a tea. Now the party can have a tea party, because that was that group. That was better for that group, and it became an important ritual, because this was in Curse of Strahd. So a warm cup of freshly made tea that lets you re-roll a free hit dice on a short rest is kind of slick and easy yeah, is kind of really fun to
Mm.
inject into role play situations. So when I add lore and
Mm.
things, it's always about what can the players interact with and have fun with and make their own story.
Yeah.
Not all the time, but
But
generally it's build on what I've accidentally given them and said and done and characters I've created and just make it. Yeah, we go from there. I now
Good.
plan a certain amount and etc.
I kind of
Yeah,
want to actually pick up on that because I think,
go
like
for
as
it.
we mentioned at the start, we have different kind of approaches to world building.
Mm.
And like, if for my players, if you were listening, I do plan, but I also really like to incorporate things that the players come up with. So I'm not a fan of shopping episodes, as it were, but potentially I may have had, when asked to describe what was surrounding the town square with the key puzzle and the gate to the fully planned out dungeon and an adventure underneath, I may have mentioned the souvenir shop on the side as a throwaway line. At which point my players spent half an hour making friends with the shopkeeper, who was a tabaxi, and looking at hats. Okay, they spend so much time looking at hats that that's now become an integral part of the lore of the game that we're in now. So the shopkeeper, who is a tabaxi, has become an important NPC because their sister has been involved with one of the players who has now gone missing, which is involved in the ongoing story of who is stealing memories and time from certain members of the community. And that's now a key story beat, which ties into key events in the world. And the hats, one of the hats that they bought, which was a novelty helmet, turned out to be a cursed item, which has now given one of the players 2 levels in Warlock and an unwanted patron who is also tied into the second faction that is trying to gain the time-stealing powers in the town. Now, these were before my players put shape to it. These were ideas. I had an idea of where I wanted these factions. I wanted these stories because the way that I tend to world build is very much key story beats and things that need to happen in the epic world. But because the players gave shape to that, we've now got within the party representatives of both factions of that epic
Goddamn.
fight that is coming on. And it gave really good moments to the players so that they could have their, the player with the haunted helmet, because they put it on as a joke. And I was like, excellent, roll me a wisdom save.
When they do it for the memes, love it.
Yep.
This
The
is
thing
so
is,
good.
you have
We're
to commit
talking
to that
about,
stuff, seriously.
and we're talking about lore now that you make up on the fly.
Yeah.
It's funny
Yeah.
because at the same time, both of your stories were both about lore that came up on the fly because of story, because it was fun. But at the same time, for both of them, they've now become linked to lore that you had planned, lore that you had as story beats that you wanted to hit, or that this is going to actually build to where I'm trying to get to. And that's awesome because I swear for any game, like, even if it's a one shot, you've got particular beats that you're trying to get to for sure. But some of the most fun things in the game are the things that you come up with on the fly because it works with the group. And when you don't plan, you have that little bit of lore that comes in as a random thing.
Yeah.
And then suddenly down the line, you just link up with things that you have planned for stories and go, oh, this can work here. And then it comes in, and then you do the reveal with your players. Oh my God, it's awesome. It was like last week when we had our AI game last Sunday, and I've just been thinking about it since then, about the ChatGPT GM for us. We had the monkey that came along with us everywhere, basically, who was like a real supportive kind of friend, and we befriended it. And I talked with animals and led us through and helped us with
Kiki was
information and
awesome.
stuff.
He's great.
Kiki, that's right. We
He
find
is.
out after we finish the game, she's a god. She is the monkey god of the game, which we didn't know. And that's like, oh, that is so cool. And that kind of stuff, that's the stuff that I kind of live for, to be able to bring in little bits of story that has been created because of the group together, and that becomes an integral part of the world that we're building together. It's
Kind of
fantastic.
taking that collaborative storytelling, which everyone acknowledges, tabletop role playing is collaborative storytelling. Well, it's collaborative world building when you get to that, because the world becomes persistent when you have players that are coming back, when you have, NPCs and elements in the world, because I think most GMs tend to build a world that they're comfortable with, that they know the lore around. So now this is collaborative world building, collaborative lore building, and I'm not sure if there's really any other, I guess, fiction, narrative, creative endeavor where you have that accidental on purpose collaboration about the world, about the mythology.
Not even. That's
Mm.
one of the magic markers of role-playing games. In tabletop role-playing games, it is an utterly unique experience because you are involved, you are part of, you are involved, and you are influencing a world, a story, a universe.
Yeah.
And your scope just goes up from there. Like we've touched on it, scope and scale. It comes not only from prep but also world building, because how much of the world do you need to build? How much of the plot revolves around that world? Because you can, again, we find it very enjoyable, and a lot of players create characters they're never going to use, and game masters create worlds they may never use.
Yeah.
Some of us may be more guilty
Some
than
of us.
others. I've done it a couple of times. I've created worlds that I really want to run as a homebrew campaign, and they have not seen the light of day. But it's just
to put a sun in that world. That'll help.
the thing. Beautiful. I love it. And then I'm going to say that when I run that first campaign session.
I want to be
I
there
will
for
say,
that.
Let there be light. I will run it for you guys. It's going to be fun. But like you can go up from there. You can just build a local world. And I think Thea, you mentioned that you like making maps and like having locations.
So I was
and
actually
then things happen in those locations, for example.
Yeah, I was going to pick up on that when you said, how do we do world building? I went, well, let me give you a literal answer.
Exactly.
So I think that is good. I am not a deep lore, build out the tomes, write the background stories down, which is weird because I'm a very wordy kind of person. I know you'd never guess that I talk a lot. But when I'm creating games and creating stories, what I tend to do is I actually will have, for a one-shot in particular, but even for LinkedIn and ongoing games, I start to make maps, and those maps are kind of my visual cues for the key story points and the key beats that I have in my head, and that I may not have written down anywhere. But when I make the maps, I'll put, it depends how much of a rush I'm in. Sometimes I'm like, here is a building, here is a square, here is a well. Things will happen. But when I'm being more intentional about it, particularly with the interconnected storylines, so in the game that I'm running at the moment, there's an arc of there was an import of smelly cheese, which you think would be funny, but is actually linked to an undead cult that is slowly coming in to take over the politics of the city, which was alerted and has come to defeat the Time Stealers. Anyway, lots of stories all connected. But I made the first map of the port. And in that, it had key story beats. So it had the ship, it had the stall where the cheese came from. There was a lot of cheese. It was a very cheesy storyline. And
Beautiful.
yes, there was puns like that.
Amazing.
So on those maps, and then for like mapping out the rest of the story, literally, I'll do, say, a region map. And in that region map, I know that I want this story beat to happen in the town of Portus, for example. I know that the Sleeping Mountains have got a story beat. And it might not be necessarily that they need to connect, but in traveling between those, whatever the players choose to do, that's the way the story will connect. And so that, when I think about my prep and my lore building, most of the product, if we're going to talk product and sound like capitalists, is maps. I don't really have a lot of notes. I have maps and pictures, and the pictures are mainly to help remind me of the characters. I would never show them to the players because often they're of real people, but it's to help me as a prompt. And I think that is what world building is primarily for me. I take a very minimalist approach, but it's prompts and little cues to trigger this kind of cascade in my brain to get back to the thought, at least close to the thought process I had when I was writing that story. Yeah.
So beautiful.
But I think you guys are a bit different. Like I know that we all love building maps, but I know, Jared, you've got some pretty amazing ways of putting all your lore together and tracking things.
It's borderline obsessive. No,
this is not an intervention.
It's just it's just something that I've worked on, which is I like having systems and software because I've been fortunate enough to have started early enough with D&D and role-playing games to not have any digital tools, specific digital tools, like computers were around. If I wanted to, I could have typed up notes and printed them and done all of that sort of stuff, but I wouldn't have had my tablet that I have now, where I can actually do everything from this tablet. I've got a little keyboard thing for it, and I can run, and I prep, and I do everything on this tablet with Notion and with D&D Beyond and all of these things. It is wonderful, and I love running from it because I can have so much more information accessible in a way that my brain understands how to get it, where to get it from. It's organized my way. The power of something like OneNote or Notion is you get so attached to that system because you put all the effort into creating it. Nobody comes there and says, you can't. There is software and websites like Obsidian Portal and World Anvil, and when you are creating worlds in these tools, they're wonderful because World Anvil, I think it is, also they do a lot of role playing stuff, but it's also for writers. And so is Obsidian Portal. Is role players have picked up tools for writers because it's useful to have those prompts: who, what, when, where, etc. And you do a very, very similar thing as writing a narrative or anything else.
And the relationship
or a novel.
between
Exactly, relationship
various
matrices,
people,
motivations,
places,
all
groups,
of these things,
all that kind of stuff.
very
It's been
similar.
so important.
So I still don't think that there is a system like that out there necessarily, but it's you're going to have the few things that you're able to keep track of a lot more fluidly and things that are important and leave the right impression. Whereas I can do a lot of voices. God damn, I can't remember who's doing what voice because I have so many, and that's actually a hard thing to keep track of. I'll say an accent, but what inflection did I have? And I'd have to keep really accurate notes or voice clips, like, how granular do you want to be with that? But that's an important thing for me because my voices are an important part of my games. So put the time into that. Thank you for the follow. Degenerate.
Degenerate?
Hang on. No, there's a letter I
Oh.
can't see. Degenerate Hugh something.
Ah.
I've butchered that. I should have waited until
Thanks,
I could
follow.
have seen the full name. Thank you so much for following.
Follow.
Degenerate Huskers.
Huskers.
Thank you so much for the follow.
Amazing. Thank you. And
I
thank
love
you
the
for
name.
ending my ramble because I got where I was going basically. You
I
can
think
get
it's
super
interesting though
granular
when we
with
talk
it
about
and keep track of everything if you really wanted to, but it is always about, like I've said in the past, mise en place. The prep that I do is 99% world building, aka lists of names, because they're going to interact with the world and people, and then they're going to need a name. So that's always going to be there, but it doesn't necessarily matter what the name is just yet or who that character is, because I will give them influences and motivations based on things that are happening in my world. Do I want them to be aligned with the players or an antagonist? Like, where
I think that's an interesting point about world building. It's not just the world as in the mountains, the trees, the rivers, the cities. World building is the people. And I think sometimes people might get a little caught up on building the physical world and the gods and what is the mythology and what's the level of technology and do we have magic in this world and what level of magic, when the world I think that is important to the players is that immediate world. It's who am I talking to? Who is my PC fallen in love with the NPC? And yes, I'm looking at you, my players.
all of them, all the time.
All of them, all the time. Who are they adopting? But what are the cute little animals? What are the bugs that explode and suddenly everyone's hallucinating? That's the living, breathing part of the world.
100%. I love that. Yeah, the way I've also put it to people before is there's two things. I've forgotten the first one, but I remembered the second one, which is a fun little role play thing for new role players. So if anyone's a relatively new role player, even if you're not, this might be a fun thing. And it's a theater thing that is for acting classes. And they say, all right, I want you to get in the role of a chicken, and you're at Farmer Dave's ranch, and he's got a nice little chicken coop.
Are you familiar with it?
And you just start fleshing out a little bit of a plot for this chicken, and you can give yourself a name if you want. You can be on Dave's farm, and you're Freddie, Freddie the rooster, and you've got all your coop that you take care of. But one day you're there in the morning. You're there in the morning, and you're about to put out your morning call to wake the farmers. But there is an unfortunate sight in the distance. There's a flash of light and a huge mushroom cloud.
A rooster comb.
What do you do? Yeah. Okay. All right.
Not rooster crowing very
All
well.
right.
Hang on.
All right.
There we go. There we go.
Boom.
What is
Good shot.
Oh, well. For anyone that's listening, we're all kind of competing
We're
for the
just
best
mucking
rooster
around with our
home,
head.
and
Anyway, what are we?
Aaron's
What are we
winning.
doing? What are we doing? You are
Shrink it.
Freddy the Rooster. What would you do when you
Yeah.
see this flash of light in this mushroom cloud?
So this is. Are we doing
you-
this
are you
exercise?
asking us
Because I
as
feel
well?
like
I mean, chat's asking. Chat's answering.
yeah, keep pecking the floor. Okay. I mean, yeah.
Freddy the
I mean, I
Rooster,
think
I'd freak out. Like, oh my God, I'd lose it. And I'd be like, run, everyone, run. And just run around the whole chicken coop trying to get everyone out of there.
For sure.
I
That's
would
me.
watch the world
That's my Freddy.
burn. My Freddy is a nihilist and will watch the world burn.
Get some teas, sit back. Yeah.
So true.
Yeah, just like light a
Um,
cigarette up. Put the
So here's
spurs on.
here's the whole point of the exercise is just like we've been saying, there is a bigger
Yeah, yeah.
world, but that locus of control that chicken has, and that sphere, that universe that they're involved in, is the coop and the farm and the trees and the sun and the sky
It's the
and the
immediate
ground.
world.
It's the immediate
Yep.
The
world,
world that
and their
matters.
context, and whatever that flash and mushroom cloud is, they don't know what that is.
Mm.
But what you guys both did is also put yourselves in the role of a character, which was so lovely. Because Ian was like, "Oh well, I'm gonna react. I'm gonna do something. I'm gonna, and a chicken could and would do that, but not necessarily the badass, badass world-ending rooster. Just it's my time, which I love.
When it's gonna happen. But I think that
Two
tells you
very
all about
different
the
games.
world.
So
And I want to actually jump in. So go. Sorry, I'm going to cut you off
take it.
real
No,
quick.
take it.
So I think when we're talking about world building and doing something like that, it goes back to that point where we talked about collaborative world building and collaborative lore. Because you could go in two quite different directions if you wanted to pick up if Ian and I were players and we were starting to build a world and flesh it out like that. That's taking the world is going to become a very different place depending on what path of chicken you choose. And I love that, and that's what I think is exciting. And I think that's something that maybe when you're starting out doing world building, if you have put so much effort into building your world and you're so wedded to it, it can occasionally be maybe it's a opportunity. You might miss that opportunity because you've got your heart and your soul in that world, and that's 100% valid. But at the same time, do you then accidentally cut out your player's agency in building that world?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean,
Completely.
you can throw it to session zero as well with, prompting questions like, do you guys want to go through that process? If you are homebrewing something, is this exploring and having fun in the game master's world, or is this, hey, how collaborative can we get with this? Because that would be amazing.
Yeah. What's your approach, Ian?
Yeah, it's so good hearing both of yours as well, because I was thinking about, I mean, very much like if I've got an ongoing game, I use similar tools like yourself, Jared. I use Trello, which is a way to collect information, collect groups of information and store it and know the relationships between things as well. And that helps over time because then it really gives me a database, really, just a huge library of information, and I know how to access it. We were talking before, there may be something that I come up with that I think is really good as a story point that I want to come into. And I thought, here's a scene for it. And then we get into the scene, and the little bit of incongruous information I give about the strange looking water bottle that they find on there, that they go, what is that? That looks really good. And I was like, I literally just made that up. It has nothing to do with the story. Sure, we'll go with that. And the bit that I had created that was important, I put into a drawer, and I'll be like, okay, it's still there. As much as I love it, I can't shoehorn it in. It needs to happen when it's ready. So that's there, and it's collected, and I can jump into it and connect it whenever I want. What's interesting though is because a lot of the games I've been using for Dungeons and Dragons lately have been based on the Forgotten Realms world, simply because there's lore already there, and I don't have to worry too much about creating all of it. And I've also been playing for 30 plus years in that world, so I have that as lore background, which is already there, which is fantastic. So it's there, but I don't have to reach for it. And if I do, it's going to be, this is where it came to. The main group I've been running with was we played the intro box, Lost Mine of Phandelver.
Yeah.
That is the first D&D game for 5th edition.
Yeah.
And I deliberately wanted to do that as an intro, but just to build off whatever they came up with.
Mm.
So and this is similar for all the games the games that I run. I try to have a very simple hook. I just want to have whatever it is that's there. I knew that was going to be a longer game. That's why I went with the intro game. But for one shots or for shorter games or whatever, I just think, what's the basic kind of story? What are the main story points I want? Maps are vital because for me, it helps. Like you
Yeah.
said, Thea, for you and for you, Jared, it's visual. It just goes, yep, I get where that is.
Mm.
This is the world that they can see. This is their chicken coop, and
Yep.
that's the limit. And then I've picked out there's three main things. I can call it kind of three main ideals I have when it comes to lore building.
Mm.
And that's why the number one is too much lore is too much information to start with.
Oh, yeah.
Chicken coop idea of that is the world that you start with.
Mhm.
Keep it simple. I don't need all that lore yet. It's like it's too early. And also, I think you said something about this there as well. I can't build the story really. I mean, the Lost One of Phandelver story, for anyone who knows it, has a particular kind of path, and there's a few little sandbox moments where they can try anything, but it is a very simple storyline. That's not what I'm trying to do. The game I've got is the people I'm playing with. I want them to go to 20th level. I didn't know where it was going to go after that adventure. And
Yeah.
it kind of went on based on the stories and ideas that they came up with.
Mm.
So it is group world building. And
Love that.
we have stuff in there specifically because of the character choices and the mysteries that they brought in
Mm.
that there's a couple, one of their characters actually went missing, and we're in book 3 of their story now. They're about nearly 8th, 9th level now.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the search for this character is this book because they
Yeah.
disappeared and they don't know where they are. And they've just found out where he is. He's a ranger. He's gone after a devil who's been rampaging around. So basically, this whole campaign is based on the relationship of some of them. And the player who played that character is playing a different character, no relation to him, but thinks this is an important thing to do. And they're all heading off on this investigation. So can't reveal all of that. I don't think you know what we want to play. We don't know our game until we play it together. We start building it, and then you start going, here's where they want to start going. I know where I was keen to. How do we start linking those ideas together? So that was you can't reveal too much too soon. You just keep it simple. That's like, you can have ideas, but you don't know if you're ever going to come across them.
Yeah. Well, it's
Keep
like that
that
idea,
simple.
that
Second
real
thing for
problem
me
in
was the
movies.
revelation of lore. That moment of revelation.
Yeah, I was just going to pick up on that. I think a mistake a lot of movies and a lot of particularly Hollywood movies make is that they've got all this lore and they want to just tell it to you. So here's my narrative dump of what's going on in the
Oh my God,
background.
yeah.
And
Yeah.
I think that really does kill tension, like what you're saying. It doesn't. You're
Yeah.
not building a story. You're not building tension and I think it can be really tempting when I've got this amazing lore. Like even the AI GM did a good job. Didn't tell us about the monkey god until right towards the end.
And that's the thing is I think we also
Yeah.
I definitely was like, wow, that's just straight up like okay. As soon as I knew that we were going into a monkey god temple and a monkey was kind of mucking around and following us, I was like, this is a pretty easy thing to start mucking around with, and that's just my GM brain that just took over. But
Fair.
I was actually listening on the radio today that they were, I don't know why, it was the weirdest thing out of context, just in a client's car today. We they have the radio on, and I hear them talking about the Marvel Cinematic Universe and how Marvel have like dumped so much of their universe and all of their popular characters all into the MCU already.
Yeah.
And now with Endgame, it
Yeah.
was just this utter pinnacle of cinematic mastery. And when are they going to hit that story beat again? Like, they cannot dump more lore. They cannot create a whole new cinematic universe. They have to tell small stories now.
I have to pull back. I have to pull back.
So,
Yeah,
and
completely.
they have to be
That's a
nuanced
whole
with it now.
discussion.
It's not about whiz bang big production, epic, wars across however many movies. It's about doing pieces of glorious thing, and I think that's again, you're talking about your scope and scale.
Yeah.
There's also the ebb and flow, isn't it, of lore information?
Yeah.
Because when you have a major revelation of something coming in, you got time. You need to spend time just with that information. Like, Frodo finding
Mm.
about the ring and realizing what it is. He spends like the next book just trying to
Yeah.
find people to help him take it somewhere to get it destroyed, and he's barely able to deal with it. And
Mm.
it's like you can't introduce too much stuff after that
Yeah.
because it's overwhelming. It's like,
Yeah.
let
Absolutely.
me deal with this. Let me deal with as a being, and how am I going to leave home, and how am I going
Mm.
to I don't know if I'm a hero enough yet. I don't know if I have the
Yeah.
ability to actually deal with this. So
Yeah.
that's why I thought the revelation of
Mm.
law, that's important. You don't want to dump too much too soon, and it kind of needs to be paced out.
Mm.
But the last bit is when you do, and it's those story points, at least when I do, sorry, when
Yeah.
you do, I'm dictating this. It's really
Dictate
when
away.
what I do.
Mm.
I like to, when those story beats happen and I know that they're coming and I
Mm.
get a chance to reveal this, and it's an important one,
Mm.
knowing that it is going to change the lives of your characters, your players'
Mm.
characters forever. And how they pick up on it and where that goes
Mm.
shows a sign of the maturing characters in the
Yeah.
story. I think that's also about how your game matures
Mm.
because
Yep.
you've started to build on a very important piece of information
Mm.
that now is going to lead them into something grander. I mean, a lot of the
Mm.
role playing games that we've been playing are kind of epic fantasy or high fantasy. And so
Yeah.
there's a whole thing of going into different realms and planes of
Yeah.
existence and gods and things like this, which is a lot like the MCU, you could
Mm.
say, and a lot
Yeah.
like how Lord of the Rings is
Yeah.
different to The Hobbit. The Hobbit
Mm.
is for novices, and it's kind
Yeah.
of a kid's adventure as well. But when you get to The Lord of the Rings, it's this huge, epic
Hobbit is
kind of
levels 1 to
scale thing.
5.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
Well
absolutely.
said.
And it's
Yeah.
like
Mm.
you like following. That means the law that you bring to high levels. Do you guys find this as well? That the law that you can start bringing in when you
Mm.
play with a group over time can be a bit richer. It can be a bit
Yeah.
deeper because they can handle it more.
For
Yeah.
sure.
And it's not going to overwhelm them. I think that's a really good point.
Yeah, you got to work up to it.
Yeah, but I think
Yeah.
that also, if you're the kind of DM that perhaps is more planning on the fly, shall we say,
Mm.
that also means that you don't have that feel that pressure. Because I
Exactly.
know that, and I think there's a lot of trust that comes into that. So once you trust yourself, and you trust the players, or just not even trust the players, that is important, but trusting the process, which does sound like a very wanky thing to say, but trusting that the way that groups tend to come together is that lore will develop. So you don't have to have it. The way that people build stories, there are backstories, there are influences, there are motivations and things that caused it, and that cause those motivations and values, and that becomes the lore of your story and your world. So you don't have to come up with it all at once. I think there can be a lot of pressure looking at some of the bigger DMs out there who obviously love it, obviously love telling stories, obviously love creating worlds, but they do so much. And that is incredibly intimidating if that is not naturally your style. It's not naturally my style. As I said, I'm maps and some handwritten notes, which I occasionally can even read my own handwriting. But that is trust. And I think that I've learned in, my time being a DM and running stories, I've learned to trust me. And I've learned to trust the players that I have, that group dynamic. What did Freud
Yeah.
call it? Not Freud, Jung. The collective consciousness.
Yes.
He had a name
Absolutely.
anyway.
Yeah.
That.
Something like that. Yeah.
I'm a storyteller. I do words. I'm so good at words. There's a
Yeah.
word.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
But
Yeah, I love that. I love that.
yeah.
I thought of my other thing that was a nice kind of tool for people to slip
You're
into a toolbox.
Mm.
Was it you? Ian's a little. You were frozen for a minute in a flattering
Yeah.
thinking man pose, but you're
Mm,
back now.
it was a very sort of
Yeah, it was good. We another sort of thing, kind of like the chicken experiment, thought experiment.
where are we going
There's
now?
there's so much that can also just be explained away. Like obviously, like when the characters interact with stuff.
it's flipping out a bit over here as well. Keep going, guys.
Okay,
Yeah.
hopefully streams coming through. We when you're building a world and the players are interacting with, obviously there's lots of things that are going to change. I think Sammy was also just saying, I'll just kind of read this out because I think it's an interesting perspective. Sammy being an old player of mine, DMs are also the narrators. Sorry, hang on, it just slipped. DMs are the narrators of the story and make it realistic while the players are in the story and making it kind of happen. And he said he had to tell that to a DM of a friend of his who was, TPKing people, and it's just it's just kind of rough sometimes. But
and I think that's emphasizing that collaboration, that cooperation.
Because you are we had a little bit of a glitch. We're back. A little bit of a swap.
I think we are aware we may one of us may be in a place where they may have to leave at some point quickly. And I'm certainly not saying it's the one with the flashing exit sign in the background.
I've just cut that off, actually.
Yeah, you cut that off. So no one on the stream can see that, but we can see that.
But also, I just wanted to also say how much can be explained away, because I think, like, if you have a session 0 and you just say, okay, we're going to play this genre, this setting, that we're going to play Dungeons and Dragons. It's medieval fantasy, there's magic, there's so much of that content out there in so many different media. It's pretty palpable at this stage, and most people are going to be familiar. You don't have to have read Tolkien. It was the original, the great. We've got every flavor of it now. So when they see a glowing rune on a door, it's magic. I know what that is. And even because I'm playing a wizard, it's an enchantment or a thing. And we start to add what I've always said role-playing games is, which is effectively a common dialogue and a manner of speaking and a format of conversation at the end of the day, if you want to distill what it is mechanically. So when you have little things, and I like to use the example in Harry Potter, where there's like dishes doing themselves. Now, what is that? It doesn't matter what it is. You know that someone did a magic thing, and that is explained because there is a world of magic. Done. Yeah. So do you need to have deep, rich lore as to how the Weasleys, I think because it was in the Weasley house, how the Weasleys had figured that out, etc. But then they will do insane things in Harry Potter. And if people can remember the tavern or whatever it was, where the guy is reading the book and stirring the cup with his finger and not actually stirring the spoon that's in the cup, he's moving the finger, moving his, with it, telekinetically. That is actually, to the average viewer, not really that important. You're like, cool, it's magic. He can do that. He doesn't need a wand. He must be a pretty powerful wizard. You don't understand how powerful he would need to be, etc., etc. But do we, who is that person? What is that? You could dive into that, and that could be your random NPC at a bar that everybody, your Goblin the Goblin, who is doing this, who's this insane little wizard goblin who's just doing that, and you thought, I'll throw him in for flavor. Boom, massive, big thing. Like, does it have to be? No, but it's always about what the characters interact with, how much can be explained away, and you can just make it, and then you can make it up on the fly. That gives you permission, and it gives you a good justifiable reason to say there is more medieval shit happening and more magic fantasy things, because we agreed that is the universe. And if I said you found a laser cannon in the bottom of this sunken ship, you'd be like, what kind of epic insane quest are we going on next? It's not even a question anymore. So when you're doing this back and forth improv with your players, because that's the other thing, we can't forget that all the players are doing is mostly improv. So why can't we as a GM, how much of this do we need to prep? How much should we prep?
I think that comes back to the question we asked at the start, is how does world building help you as a GM? And it helps you by giving you that basis for your improv, I think.
Yeah, I think we've really kind of answered the question right towards the end of the episode, because I think that's it. Is we do as much as we need to feel. How did we say? I'm going to try and do this. Ian, you said, I think we do as much, something to the effect of, we do as much prep as we feel we need in order to feel comfortable. And then I think Thea might have said, and then when we have the looseness and the ability to improvise, that makes it more accessible and fun. And then I think, at the end of the day, we can't forget that everyone is collaborating. We're going to build a lot of stuff at the table in session, but having fun things that you think about and, theorize and wonder how the players can interact with, that's always just fun thought experiments for the GM as well. And at the end of the day, how you do it, how you approach it, whether that is
Yeah.
actually putting together a 150-page Google Doc, if my players are listening, and just winging it for the sake
Yeah.
of it and just having fun with it. You can do either way.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
we'll
You
strike
can
a
go
middle
all
ground
ways.
and make
You can
maps
choose.
and
Yeah.
create character art and draw them and write them out and give them tragic backstories that the players are
Yeah.
never going to know about, but that's the
Backstories
motivation.
with healthy
But
families.
Exactly. No.
it helps you.
All NPCs
Or
have
don't get
tragic backstories.
Yeah.
The acting side of it, like for any kind of character, have that backstory. It gives you that. If you know what's
Mhm.
behind it, you don't need to tell everyone, but you know
Yeah.
how to act that character because you know the tragedy they've got going on. It's
For
true.
sure.
You don't need to reveal it all. And I think it's like, I'm
Yeah.
so glad you brought up, just as we wrap up here, that there's some wonderful GMs out there and people
Mhm.
who are putting massive worlds that have got campaigns all around them that detail history and lore and continents and various little places. It's like, they're writers. That's actually
Yeah.
something that's a writer's thing to do. You do not need to do that as a GM. I think it's so important to know that. Have the chicken, have that little idea of where you want to start, and using that group with you that you've got with you, they're going to help build you it, and
Yeah.
you'll start pulling it together. It's so easy, and
Yeah.
it's so much more fun to create it that way
Yeah.
too.
That's the key
Definitely.
thing. Having fun.
At the end of the day,
Speaking of fun,
mm,
I suspect we should
And
start
for
wrapping
us,
up this
we
fun.
have to
I
wrap
think
up now.
so.
Yeah.
We've had
We're
enough.
starting to hear like, excuse me, the plane is
Final
boarding.
call. Final call.
The door is closing.
The doors are
But
closing.
before we
Mind
do,
the
what are we
gap.
doing next week? What are we doing next week, guys?
What are we doing next week? Oh, well,
I do
exactly
have
that.
a
We have an
topic,
idea.
unless Jared,
We
you put
do.
it
We're
there.
doing
Do
a
you have
thing.
I have something here. What do we have? Calendar? Would I go to my calendar?
Yeah.
Is that where we
We're
keep
also
these things?
planning, while we look up our very cunning plan, which, as you can see, we have clearly organized, ready at our fingertips. We're also planning a couple
I've
more
got one.
cozy streams.
Storytelling?
So you
More
might see us
storytelling?
doing a map making stream sometime soon.
Absolutely.
We will let everyone know in the Discord
that's
about that. Speaking of, please do join the Discord if you are not already a member. And anyone on the YouTube, yes, I've not put up the new episodes yet. I shall. It will be very exciting. Please, and I sound like that person, like and subscribe to the YouTube channel so you know when we do post, because until I get a regular schedule happening, that's the only way you're gonna know when they go up.
Gotta tick that bell, you know. Gotta have the notifications enabled. Otherwise, you might miss
Smash that bell,
an
as they
erratically
say.
posted VOD. It's there.
Yeah.
But if you want to tune in anytime, they are available here on Twitch. So if you
Under
want
videos.
to check out, we have videos, we have highlights. They're there. If you want to check out the AI game that we did, there's all 3 hours of it. It's going to be great. It'll eventually be on
which is a
YouTube,
lot
but you
of
can
fun.
catch it now there.
Yeah.
I love how we've kind of got into social media YouTuber mode. But
Oh my god, we have.
we
This is
are
my character.
no.
My character's an influencer.
But what we've
Oh my
done-
god, guys.
What we've done is the classic DM tactic of just keep talking and keep fluffing until you find the NPC name and the voice that you were looking for, or otherwise known as next week's episode, storytelling and the elements of building stories with the group. I think that is utterly perfect of a segue from where we've explored the topic of world building tonight, is because we have not forgotten, and a kind of a foundation of all of this is that we have not forgotten it's collaborative, but the characters, the group, the heroes of our stories. We're going to be expanding into that. And I think that's so beautiful because it's going to be the flip side of it. It's going to be, you know, is a player character making a backstory for their character just an exercise in creating those motivations and those influences of how they behave and why they behave and who they interact with and what their reactions are based on who they've come from. But at the same time, utterly perfect place to dig for nuggies of lore and wisdom and cool story and why not make it as personalized as possible for your players? I've tried to do that as much as possible.
I
as a
do
GM.
have-
Okay, you've got to
I've gotta
go.
run.
And that's
All
it.
right.